When it's time to scale your business, it's time for Shopify. Get everything you need to grow the way you want. Like, all the way. Stack more sales with the best converting checkout on the planet. Track your cha-chings from every channel, right in one spot. And turn real-time reporting into big-time opportunities. Take your business to a whole new level. Switch to Shopify. Start your free trial today.
Welcome into today's deep dive. We have a massive stack of recent news sources for you today. And, well, our mission is really just to cut through all the political noise and figure out what's actually going on.
Yeah, and we need to state right up front that given the sources we're looking at today, there are a lot of highly charged, conflicting viewpoints.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our goal for you today is purely to unpack the facts. We want to explain the mechanics of what is happening and why it matters without taking any sides at all. We're just here to lay out the board for you.
Exactly.
And we're going to take you from some sudden shifts in international diplomacy to military modernization, down to heated domestic wage policies, institutional scandals, and even a rain-soaked cricket pitch in England. So let's just dive right in.
Let's do it.
So our first headline today is from the geopolitical space. U.S. President Donald Trump issues a statement claiming the U.S. and Iran are getting along very well after talks in Qatar. I mean, we're talking about historically hostile U.S.-Iran relations suddenly thawing on July 1st, 2026. How does that even happen so fast?
Well, we really have to look at the mechanism of this thaw. According to Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazim Garibabadi, these weren't, sweeping, historic peace treaties with giant photo ops.
Right.
These were highly specific technical-level discussions in Doha, and they were meant to build on a memorandum of understanding from the recent Lake Lucerne summit.
Okay, so what did that summit actually do?
It essentially laid down a very basic framework for global security. Now, in Doha, they're setting up a specialized communication channel, literally just to report and record violations of that initial understanding.
Wow. That sounds less like a friendship and more like a heavily monitored parole system. Trust, but verify every single move.
Precisely. And a massive piece of this puzzle revolves around $6 billion in frozen Iranian assets that are currently sitting in Qatar.
That's a lot of money.
Right. Garibabadi noted they met with Qatari officials, including their central bank, to figure out how to spend part of those funds based on goods that Iran officially communicates it needs.
But, okay, let me push back on that for a second. Because money is fungible, right?
Sure.
So even if the U.S. and Qatar set up this restrictive channel where Iran can only use that $6 billion to buy, say, medicine or agricultural goods, doesn't that just free up $6 billion of Iran's domestic revenue to be spent on, defense or nuclear programs? How does this oversight actually work?
Yeah, and that is the core critique of any asset unfreezing. But the counter-argument and the diplomatic logic here is all about immediate behavioral leverage.
Okay, how so?
So the Qatari central bank effectively acts as a highly restrictive escrow. By controlling the spigot of those specific funds, the U.S. maintains a real-time lever. If that monitoring channel detects a violation of the Lake Lucerne agreement, the Qatari channel can be frozen instantly.
Oh, I see. So it keeps them at the table through managed economic incentives rather than total isolation, which is fascinating, especially when you look at our next headline. The U.S. Treasury removes 4 Indian companies from its Russia-linked sanctions list. So while they're managing that financial release with Iran, they're simultaneously calling back on sanctions regarding India.
Yeah, so these companies are RRG Engineering Technologies, Lokesh Machines, Galaxy Bearings, and Sharia Aeronautics.
And they were on the list for what, exactly?
They were previously flagged for allegedly supplying dual-use items to Russia's defense sector. Things like radar equipment, roller bearings, microelectronic stuff that has civilian uses but can be repurposed for military hardware.
Now, the Treasury Department didn't broadcast the exact reasons for the reversal. But taking a step back, what does this delisting tell you about U.S. priorities right now?
It really points to a realization about global supply chain realities. I mean, Washington is heavily scrutinizing components going to Russia, obviously, but they're weighing that against the strategic necessity of the U.S.-India partnership.
Right, because secondary sanctions are risky.
Very risky. If you penalize major Indian industrial players over isolated component sales, you risk pushing a vital Indo-Pacific ally away at a really crucial moment.
So it's a strategic calculus. You need the player on your side for the long game more than you need to penalize them for a past move.
Exactly.
Which brings us perfectly to how India is maneuvering on its own board. Let's look at our next headline. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takichi makes her first official visit to New Delhi. So India is looking east.
Yeah, this Eastern diplomatic push is super significant. This was for the 16th India-Japan Annual Summit with Prime Minister Modi. They are leaning heavily into the India-Japan Special Strategic and Global Partnership.
Focusing on trade, defense, keeping the Indo-Pacific stable.
Right. But it's not just external alliances.
No, which leads to our next headline. The new Army Chief General Dhiraj Seth outlines his VIJAY vision for military modernization, so they're fortifying internally as well.
Yeah, General Seth is the 31st Chief, and VIJAY stands for Vigilance, Innovation, Jointness, and Integration. Aatmanirbharata, which means self-reliance, and Yuddha, which means putting the warrior first.
And he's aligning this with the decade of transformation running from 2023 to 2032. But I have to admit, I get a little confused whenever I hear about military modernization in a broad sense.
How so?
Well, the Indian Army has roughly 1.4 million active personnel. It's a massive historic bureaucracy. How does an institution of that sheer size actually pivot to new technology in real time? I mean, you can't just push a software update to 1 million soldiers.
No, you can, and it is an absolute logistical nightmare. But General Seth's background is very telling here. He previously commanded 2 different operational army commands along the Western Front.
So he knows the reality on the ground.
Exactly. He understands that modernization isn't just about buying new drones or advanced rifles. The critical word in his vision is jointness.
What does that actually mean in practice, though?
It means forcing legacy systems to communicate. For decades, militaries often operated in silos, right? The Air Force's tech didn't seamlessly talk to the Army's ground sensors.
Oh, right.
Plus, India has historically relied on a mix of foreign platforms, notably older Soviet and Russian hardware. Jointness means creating the digital architecture so that an older mechanical tank can share data with a newly developed indigenous drone.
Ah, okay. And the Aatmanirbharata part, the self-reliance.
That's about ensuring the software, the hardware, and the supply lines for that integration are built entirely within India's borders, so they're immune to foreign sanctions.
Got it. So securing the maritime domain with Japan provides the external cover, and the VIJY vision builds the internal defense capability.
2 mutually reinforcing pillars of the same grand strategy.
Makes sense. But while India is looking east for strategic partnerships, there is a renewed push from civil society to look west. Which brings us to our next headline. 117 individuals write to PMs Modi and Shehbaz Sharif to restart comprehensive dialogue.
Yeah, this brings us to a really classic tension between the desires of civil society and the strict mandates of state security.
Right. And just to lay this out neutrally for you, the listener, the signatories on this July 1st open letter include prominent figures like O.P. Shah and Kashmiri leaders like Mirwais Umar Farooq.
And they are specifically pointing back to the framework established between 2004 and 2007. That period is often viewed by peace advocates as a good line for confidence-building measures.
What are they asking for, practically?
Their demands are largely focused on everyday humanitarian and economic normalcy. So reopening the Attari-Wagah border for trade, restoring the Trinnagar-Muzaffarabad and Delhi-Lahore bus routes, and resuming normal visa processing for divided families.
But the political response was very firm, which is our next headline. BJP leader Tarun Chu asserts that terror and talks cannot go together.
Right. The government's long-standing position is that Pakistan has to verifiably dismantle its terror infrastructure before any bilateral dialogue can happen.
It really highlights the fundamental friction in how to approach a volatile border.
It does. The 117 signatories are advocating for a bottom-up approach. Their theory is that if you allow everyday commerce and human connection, it lowers the temperature.
It creates an environment where political solutions are even possible.
Exactly. But from the state's perspective, that sequence is totally backwards. They operate on a top-down security imperative. Opening borders without absolute verified security guarantees is seen as an unacceptable national security risk.
Yeah, it's a total standoff between humanitarian appeal and hardline defense requirements. And, moving inward, we see that national stability isn't just about border security. It's heavily dictated by the domestic economy.
Oh, absolutely. Domestic economic policy is where the average citizen feels the immediate impact.
Which brings us to a massive shift in rural employment law. Headline: MGNREGA replaced by the new VB-Graham-G Act on July 1st, featuring a 300 rupee national floor wage.
Yes, the Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission. And the rollout of this 300 rupee minimum reveals some really stark regional economic divides.
Yeah, I saw that. 21 states and union territories had to actively raise their daily rates to meet this new floor.
Right, and a Hindi belt state saw huge immediate hikes. Uttar Pradesh went up by 48 rupees a day, Bihar by 45.
But if you look at the South, the impact was barely noticeable. Telangana saw the absolute lowest increase, literally one single rupee, from 307 to 308.
Because states like Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka were already paying above the 300 threshold. Meanwhile, Haryana sits at the very top, paying 409 a day.
And the political opposition, mainly the Congress Party, has heavily criticized this new wage floor. They argue 300 is unjustifiably low given inflation, and they're demanding a 400 rupee minimum instead.
But the more profound critique targets the structural mechanics of the new law itself.
Right. Congress MP Saptagiri Ulaka specifically criticized the shift from a demand-driven model to a supply-driven one.
Let's break down what that actually means for a worker on the ground.
Yeah, the way I see it, the old system, the demand-driven model, was kind of like on-demand streaming. If you, the rural worker, demanded work, the government was legally obligated to provide it within a set time frame.
Okay, I like that analogy.
But the new supply-driven model under VB Graham G is more like network television. The state decides when and where the public works projects are happening, and you can only work if you fit into their scheduled programming.
That is an excellent way to visualize the shift in power. Under the new model, the state controls the spigot of employment. And furthermore, there is a new 60.40 center-state cost-sharing ratio.
Meaning the state government suddenly have to foot 40% of the bill for these projects.
Correct. So when you shift 40% of a massive employment guarantee's financial burden onto state governments and change how the work is supplied, you create an immense localized fiscal shock. State budgets have to adjust instantly.
Which often means cuts elsewhere.
Exactly. And this macroeconomic policy shift directly fuels micro-level political volatility.
And we are seeing that volatility boil over into literal street-level clashes. Which is our next headline. TMC MP Mahua Moitra faces egg attack and chor chants in Nadia.
Yeah, she was subjected to a highly aggressive protest. Her convoy was targeted. Crowds were chanting chor, which means thief, and telling her to go back.
And the sources indicate this wasn't an isolated event. A similar incident occurred just weeks prior on June 13th outside a district court involving BJP Mahila Moitra workers.
Right, and Moitra blamed local BJP workers for orchestrating the mob tactics, saying there's a complete collapse of law and order and a failure of police protection in the state.
It just creates this dangerous feedback loop, right? When macro policies alter local economies, economic anxiety rises.
And that anxiety is channeled by local political factions, turning policy disputes into physical confrontations in the streets.
Yeah, it's intense. And that kind of pressure isn't just breaking down order in the streets, it's placing massive public and private institutions under an unprecedented microscope.
Very true.
Let's look at three major institutional disputes currently unfolding. First headline. AAP accuses Delhi government of shielding the mastermind in a 650 crore health department corruption case.
The mechanics of this dispute revolve entirely around accountability and investigative jurisdiction. On one side, you have the Aam Aadmi Party AAP, with Delhi President Saurabh Bharadwaj accusing the bureaucracy and the anti-corruption branch of actively shielding a key accused individual named Rajiv Rangila.
Right. Bharadwaj claims Rangila is the true mastermind, the owner of the private companies that allegedly secured tenders at vastly inflated rates, but he hasn't been arrested.
AAP MP Sanjay Singh is alleging this points to broader complicity within the government apparatus. But the counter-narrative is just as fierce.
Delhi BJP President Harsh Malhotra responded by accusing AAP of fabricating that 650 crore figure entirely for political mileage.
He pointed out that Bharadwaj failed to provide hard evidence for that specific monetary claim. And most critically, Malhotra asserted that it was actually Chief Minister Rekha Gupta who ordered the anti-corruption branch investigation in the first place.
Which led to the initial arrests. So, again, to be clear to you, the listener, we are simply laying out the competing claims from the sources here. One side alleges a systemic cover-up. The other alleges the political weaponization of an internal audit.
Exactly.
But if we want to talk about auditing failures, we have to look at our next headline. Ram Mandir Kumbh Mela, donation theft busted, 8 accused.
This story is essentially about the illusion of security.
It really is. Imagine you're guarding the sacred donation boxes at the Kumbh Mela. You have surveillance, locked rooms, a private agency counting the cash. And then you realize the thieves are the very people holding the keys.
Right. During the 2025 Kumbh Mela, Ayodhya police uncovered a conspiracy where 8 individuals systematically siphoned off substantial amounts of cash. The alleged ringleaders were 2 brothers-in-law, Lav Kush and Anikalp Mishra.
And the logistics are just wild. They were quietly hiding bundles of cash inside blankets at a local yoga center. One of the boxes was literally labeled Aram Raja Kush.
But how does a conspiracy involving that much physical cash stay quiet?
That's the question.
You have to look at the vulnerabilities built into this system. It's less like a dramatic bank robbery and more like discovering termites in your foundation. The structure looks completely intact from the outside while the people inside just hollow it out.
Wow.
The police noted that an accused named Tinu Yadav allegedly held one of the actual keys to the counting room. And even worse, authorities are investigating the role of State Bank of India employees.
Wait, the bank staff?
Yeah, the SBI employees who were specifically tasked with overseeing the private agency doing the counting.
That is the ultimate systemic failure. When the third-party auditors hired to ensure integrity are allegedly compromised, no amount of cameras will save you.
No. But the Temple Trust did manage to recover 89 lakh rupees based on intelligence from one of the accused before the official FIR was even filed. They noticed the accused's financial transactions far exceeded their known incomes.
Crazy. Well, our third institutional headline shifts from sacred trusts to elite social spaces. Center issues show cause notice to evict the Delhi Gymkhana Club.
Right, this is a historic, highly exclusive club sitting on 27.3 acres of prime real estate on Safdarjung Road.
The government is moving under the Public Premises Act of 1971, terminating their perpetual lease. They want to reclaim the land for public purposes, citing defense infrastructure and governance projects.
The club was ordered to vacate by June 5th. They didn't. So they are now officially classified as unauthorized occupants and have until July 7th to legally explain why they shouldn't be forcibly evicted.
So if you look at the Delhi Health Department dispute, the Ram Mandir heist, and the Gymkhana eviction, the unifying theme really is just the microscope of public scrutiny.
Absolutely. We are in a moment where no institution, regardless of its political mandate, religious sacredness, or elite status, is immune from legal reckoning.
It is a heavy, intense reality to process. International sanctions, domestic wage overhauls, institutional corruption. You would hope for a breather, a moment to just sit back and watch some sports.
But as is often the case, nature had entirely different plans.
Which brings us to our final headline. First T20 international between England and India abandoned due to rain.
A literal washout at Chesterley Street.
Total damp squib. But we did get to analyze India's innings before the weather completely shut things down. India managed to post 189 for 7, and it started as an absolute disaster.
Yeah, Sanju Samson and Ishan Kishan both registered ducks. 2 massive wickets gone within the first 2 overs.
As someone who analyzes systems, what do you see when you look at that brief window of gameplay? Because 189 is a solid recovery.
You see the complete tactical evolution of modern T20 cricket. Historically, if a team lost their top order for 0 runs in the first 2 overs, especially in damp, swinging English conditions, the systemic response was preservation.
Right, you'd block, play defensively, just try to bat out the 20 overs, damage control.
Exactly. But this Indian squad didn't do that at all. They responded with statistical aggression.
Yeah, they really did.
The modern tactical response to an early shock is to actively counterattack to disrupt the bowler's rhythm.
And it worked. Abhishek Sharma came in and was incredibly explosive. He hit 59 off just 24 balls, including 4 sixes. Captain Shreyas Iyer anchored the recovery with a steady 68 off 47.
And then Shivam Dubey provided the late firepower with 42 off 21 balls.
Despite England's Saqib Mahmood bowling beautifully to take 3 for 33, India still posted a highly competitive 189.
It just proves that modern teams no longer panic when their initial game plan fails. They trust the depth of their roster to adapt under pressure.
England definitely felt the total was slightly below par, but the rain ensured we'll never know how the chase would have unfolded. The series heads to Manchester tied at 0-0. Hopefully they get clearer skies.
We can certainly hope.
All right, let's take a breath. We have covered an incredible amount of ground today for you. We started with the rapid shifts in diplomacy, exploring the mechanics of the U.S.-Iran asset release in Qatar, and why the U.S. chose to lift sanctions on those Indian tech firms.
We examined India's dual strategy, seeking external maritime cover through Japan, while General Seth pushes to untangle legacy military supply lines internally.
We navigated the deep tensions over the Kashmir border, looking at civil society's push for normalcy versus the government's anti-terror mandate. We broke down the new VB-G wage laws and how shifting fiscal burdens onto states creates street-level anger like we saw in Bengal.
And we looked at institutions under fire, from the Delhi Health Department to the insider threat of the Ram Mandir heist to the eviction of the Delhi Gymkhana Club.
It is a massive amount of information to process.
It really is. But I think it leaves you with a really vital concept to mull over. Across all the sources today, whether it's diplomats negotiating escrow channels, or bureaucrats drafting rural employment formulas, or even a cricket captain planning a batting order, we see an obsession with control.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We constantly build elaborate systems to try and manage our world. But whether it's a sudden geopolitical reversal, a trusted bank employee pocketing the keys, or a rain cloud over Chesterfield Street, the true test of a nation, an economy, or a sports team isn't how perfectly they draft the initial plan.
Right.
It is how quickly they can adapt when the script is suddenly thrown out the window.
The ultimate test of resilience. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.